I get a lot of comments on my PTR videos and even my other rifle videos asking, if I had to, if shit hit the fan or whatever, which one would I use, the PTR or, a 5.56 rifle like the Steyr AUG that I like, or the Tavor, which is okay by my standards from my experiences, or AR, which one would you prefer? And that really goes back to being a very subjective thing. Also, what I get is, between the Steyr AUG and the PTR, which one would I choose? Well, I choose both, just to answer that right off the bat. And each one has their own intended purpose depending on how you want to set it up. But basically, the PTR and the Steyr AUG are basically on the same level as, and they would be serving as medium range engagement tools, not necessarily reaching out to people and trying to start a fight and red dawn everybody. So why would you want a PTR given that you could get an AR-10 or some other rifle? Well, first thing is, obviously we know that the 7.62x51 NATO is a little less powerful than 308, but even though that is the case, typically the effective rounds will be in full metal jacket. Full metal jacket will do just fine for anti-personnel uses and stuff like that, even hunting. But typically people want hold points. You won't really need that if really you want to go in fantasy land and ask me about shit hit the fan. That's how I'm going to answer, just full metal jacket. Steel case even, especially steel case for this rifle, because it actually works a little bit better. And if you look at a similar rifle like the FAMAS, it actually uses a delayed blowback using just a lever, whereas this uses rollers. So it's a very similar concept, but without fluting in the chamber. They needed something that wasn't going to expand as much and wasn't going to be as extreme, so they had to use steel case ammo in their earlier generations. Now with this, steel case ammo works just fine. There's not really much of a reason for brass. At least I don't see any logical choice, but basically an advantage that the PTR would have over the Steyr is, say you're in an area, kind of like here in Alaska, if you're working in the city and you expect to take contact from random areas, and if you don't end up getting shot and then you want to sit there and engage them, then sure, fantasy land, this would be better, because medium range distances or even long range distances, your terminal performance is going to outdo a 5.56 any day of the week. But beyond that, the recoil compared to other AR-10s and stuff like that, the PTR actually has less recoil. If you go with the current models that have the enhanced buffer, it's actually going to be less no matter what you're firing. It's just that much of a difference. It's very durable. It's actually proven to be very durable. It's very simple. So basically it's a minimalist design, and they took the most basic design from the Sturmgewehr 45, I believe it was, and or 44, and they enhanced it off of that, and that's what the SETME was. But you got to realize at that time, when the Germans were designing this stuff, they wanted to cut manufacturing, and they were trying to make it as easy as possible to make these guns. So it was basically the best of a worst case scenario, and that's what this rifle is. But it's actually proven to be a very reliable design, and we got to credit the Germans in their during their death strokes of war production. But beyond that, the variety of parts on the market, how cheap they are to kind of just set up your rifle and get magazines and stuff, that's basically what I'm talking about. Parts themselves are actually pretty expensive for this kind of setup. But you don't really need much of a setup right here. This is it. I got a $200, it was $200 when I got it. It was kind of on the high end. Now you can get these for maybe 50 bucks. And I got the wide forearm grip because when you're actually shooting it fast, when you're really shooting your guns, you will make it hot. That's just the way it is. So I really like that. So in general, I prefer the PTR over any other platform. And I would like to experiment with the RFB, but I using FAL magazines, I'm not going to spend all that money to kind of see if it's worth a replacement. But starting new, maybe, if FAL magazines were more readily available and less expensive, I would actually have started with the RFB and done more experimentation with that. The manual of arms is very similar. You can lock it back, and this is probably the most reliable manual of arms, and it goes same with the Steyr AUG. Lock it back, reinsert a new magazine, and the funny thing is, retention of the magazine is the bigger goal. You're not just going to trash all your magazines. Say you only have like 10 magazines, you're not going to just trash them during a firefight. You want to keep a hold of them. If you survive, you're going to want to load them, and you're not going to go back 200 yards when you were fighting through, surviving, and collecting those magazines. Just as unrealistic, and the tactical community has really tried to influence that. But I'm not going to sit there and fish around for magazines just because I wanted a quicker reload. That's what cover's for. And even my time in combat, I would not sit there and fish around for magazines on the ground when I've got more priorities, like taking a returning fire and moving. So anyways, let's go ahead and move on to the Steyr AUG and discuss why I would choose that over any other rifle. Now, right off the bat, I know people are gonna say stuff like, well, why would you do a bullpup? It's a slower manual of arms, and it's just not that great. It's weird to fire the trigger, but realistically, the Steyr AUG is way better for a few reasons. Number one, it is more durable than an AR, and it's been proven so because the bolts last longer. The springs, it's distributed through 2 springs, and they really help each other and enhance the durability. The recoil, I noticed, is maybe not as little as an AR, but that's because just the way it is. But the weight principle with this is very deceiving. This could be a 10-pound rifle right here, but you're not even going to notice it after a while because you've got 2 hands holding up the forward end, and all the weight is in your shoulder. So that doesn't even come into the equation. Reloads, try actually running your AR in, say, a class in areas like here in Alaska or most other areas. Most of you don't even maintain your weapons properly, so you're going to have malfunctions. What's the most devastating malfunction to have? Bolt overrides, and even double feeds. Typically with this rifle, the manual of arms for correcting every malfunction except bolt overrides, because it's impossible with this design, it is basically just locking it back, getting out the magazine, and shaking. That's it. And if it's so extreme, like a stuck case, you can pull out the barrel and actually extract the case. And you don't need to sit there with a cleaning rod necessarily. And if it's that extreme, whatever, but it's a lot easier to get to rather than having a clunky rifle and risking knocking the action in the battery. So with that, the reloads are also more consistent, and the stock or the original AUG magazines are way more reliable than any AR magazine, and they do not cause a lot of the big problems that AR magazines have. This is a NATO version, so I am subject to some of the flaws that the AR magazines can give, but in general, even weak springs will lock this rifle open, and that's something that Tavor and other ARs cannot do. Kind of weird, but anyways, the reloads for this are way more reliable because you can lock it back. You just get up here, you lock it back, put in your fresh one, and there you go. You don't need the thumb release, you don't need to worry about speed, because again, it's all about consistency and building that one method to rule them all. In this case, this is probably the best thing to do. And you don't need to look at it. Everything is within 90-degree bend of the arm. Everything is compressed. You don't have to take it out here just to, rack it. Everything I need to do, if I just see, oh, well, it didn't, extract, or it missed a cartridge, everything's right there, and I'm not going to smack myself in the face doing it. So everything can be done in the shoulder, unlike the AR where you have to bring it into your workspace and then get back on target. So it's really subjective to whether you're in the tactical community and you have other priorities that literally make no sense. So with that, the modularity of this rifle keeps up with the AR-15 amazingly. The quick change barrel system, how easy everything can be changed out, and pretty much everything, the options that you have for the receiver, for a rail system, to having a fixed sight. I love fixed sights. And the reason why is my actual experience with, sights that screw onto a Picatinny rail, and a lot of people are like, oh, I've never had a problem. You know, the funny thing when people talk about not having problems, most of those people fire 5 rounds a year. And they're sitting on a bench rest. They're not actually bumping into things with the rifle and actually using your rifle, because typically things will happen. You'll set it up and it'll fall down, and you can lose 0 with things like ACOGs, and even red dot sights can be jimmied a little bit, and you can damage the Picatinny rail in some cases. With this, very hard to do, and those people, they're like, well, if you damage it, you got to replace the whole receiver. Okay, and if I really have to do that, then I'll go with the second shittiest option of mounting something on here and, you know, zeroing it. But most of the time you're not really going to actually have problems with the lens in here, or, you know, much of any cracks, because of the recessed lens. And I don't really hold it as a valuable or even a relevant excuse or, you know, reply to my, you know, fixation on fixed sights. The same goes with the Tavor. I have the fixed sight model, the IDF version, and I love it to death. It is done very well, and it was designed, it's built into the barrel very much like this is built into the receiver. It's just rock solid. And I can change this out for a Picatinny rail if I really need to. I just punch out pins, unscrew some of the hex screws, and I'm good to go. But it is a little bit difficult. Got to kind of melt the Loctite on there, so you know it's not backing out. But anyways, beyond that, let's go ahead and talk about the last reason. The last reason to have a Steyr AUG is basically it supplements everything you would need. You basically have a full-length conventional rifle length if you get the 20-inch barrel, and with this it has the length of an SBR. And the problem with having an SBR is the fact that reliability goes out the window and terminal performance suffers as well. Now a lot of people are going to counter, oh, I've never had problems. You've never shot anybody. That's what I'm talking about, is you need to have an effective range of about 200 meters or 300 meters or something like that, and you're not lacking terminal performance with these lengths of barrel or these barrel lengths. But typically 55 grain ammo is, you know, seen as being one of the better ones. Of course, 77 grain open tip match, or basically hollow points, are actually seen as doing a little bit more damage, but I think that can be supplemented with the 223 55 grain or some others, not Hornady tap. That stuff just disintegrates and penetrates like 4 inches, and law enforcement typically stays away from that stuff because they're a little smarter than you. But, you know, in that case, it's not really a political decision. It's more based off the fact that they saw plenty of people getting shot up and they didn't do a damn thing. So, all in all, pretty much my favorite rifle for the 5.56. Between the PTR and the Steyr AUG, everything being equal, of course, I would want to go with something with a little bit more power, but of course that's not always the case. And for the most part, I think the Steyr AUG would actually fit the role perfectly for most things. And the weight that you're carrying around with the 7.62, that could be a factor, but it really depends on what you're doing. So either way, you'd never want to have to use this in a red dawn scenario, and the white knight syndrome in these cases that come up with these tactical excuses, you know, or tactical excuses, aren't really living in reality. So, you know, anyways, if you have comments, go ahead and put them below, and, you know, if you want to have a discussion, go ahead. But don't be surprised if I reply with my own, you know, reasoning, and don't get offended, but I know some people will. But anyways, thanks for watching, and have a good one.